And then they're going to do a movie about Greece, but it's going to be the summer between the Summer Lovin' song. It's literally a movie. It's a prequel.
That's actually happening.
That's actually happening.
That is crazy. Will they never leave anything alone?
No property is safe.
No property is
No
safe.
property is safe.
Wow.
And that's the lesson that we're going to learn today. Because submitted to the approval of the Remakes, Reboots, and Revival Society is the tale of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
I just got chills.
Yeah.
Glitter in the fire.
Glitter in the fire. Today we're doing Are You Afraid of the Dark? And we're super, super excited.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you enjoyed our little skit of us being in front of the campfire. Sorry we're late, guys. But
Sorry.
a man had a bachelor party.
Hashtag blame Rolando.
Hashtag blame me. It's fine. But we're here for you for Halloween, and we got this done.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a very special guest, Greg Stevens of Pop Arena, most famous for Knacks. And you'll find this all out when we talk about this. So I'm Rolando.
And I'm Nicole.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals.
An original podcast.
About unoriginality.
Let's get scared.
Boo. Hey everyone, welcome to Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals, an original podcast about unoriginality. And like we mentioned, today we have a special guest in honor of Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
We have Greg Stevens of the YouTube channel Pop Arena, which actually has a fascinating series called Knacks. And these Knacks are these thoroughly well-researched videos about the history of Nickelodeon programming. And actually, the reason we came across Greg is actually because of a listener who recommended him if we ever did a Nickelodeon show. And while we weren't able to reach out to him in time for Rocko's Modern Life, this, I think, speaks to our audience nostalgia factor, because this is Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Definitely.
Which is our topic of choice today. So, Greg, hi, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well.
Great. Happy Halloween. What are you dressing up as?
Crippling debt.
Oh, good. Yeah.
How poignant. How relevant.
It's very scary.
Yeah. What about you, Nicole? What are you dressed as?
I was thinking about going as the cowboys from Brokeback Mountain.
Oh, both of them or just one?
Well, both of them. I would probably do a couple's costume.
Like a half and half type of thing.
Yeah.
Eddie, what are you dressing up as?
No idea.
Okay. All right. Well, no.
What about you, Ro?
Eddie's part. I actually haven't thought about that. I'll probably just use my same old, which is Wario, or be a clicker from The Last of Us. Those are the two costumes I have always on hand.
That's great. Wario is your go-to costume.
Well, yeah, no, because here's why. Me and Eddie did it as a couple's costume. I didn't want to be Luigi. I wanted to be either Mario, and he wanted to be Mario, though, because he has the mustache. So it's I'll be Wario then.
Yeah. And
that was our couple's costume. So there's enough of that. Greg, yeah, you do knickknacks and stuff. Can you just tell me, and our listeners know, what inspired you to do, this chronological series on Nickelodeon?
I got the idea after I was watching some YouTube videos about how, modern Nickelodeon is bad. It sucks. It's a shell of its former self. It's not like it was in my days. And I didn't realize until a little ways in that I was listening to somebody really young talk about being nostalgic for Danny Phantom, as opposed to me, who had been nostalgic for Doug.
Right.
And I remembered having those same feelings about their cartoons. Oh, Danny Phantom, that's an empty shell of Doug. Mm-hmm. and it just got me thinking about what would an accurate assessment of Nickelodeon over the years be? And to really do that, you really have to get into the weeds. So I've been watching some chronological video game shows on YouTube and was thinking I could do that for Nickelodeon, sure. And I've been regretting it ever since.
Well, I don't think you should. I've seen them. I know why you got reviewed on AV Club. Or at least promoted. I think you're doing something that is tapping into a nostalgia factor, but without you're teaching something that I guess people our age really gravitate towards. And it shows by number of followers you have. And I think that I'm so glad one of our listeners is the one who got us in touch, because I wish he could be here. He really wanted to get a chance to say hello to you, but unfortunately, he is not with us. He couldn't make it, but you know.
What's his name?
His name is Whitman.
Hi, Whitman.
Oh, he'll love that.
he's
Thank
gonna
you. But no, guys, we're here to talk today now about Are You Afraid of the Dark? Greg, did you used to watch Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh, I watched it all the time.
Oh, good. What about you, Nicole?
Oh yeah, me too. I was a big fan. Was this Nick?
This is
Nick, yes.
This is just Saturday Night Nickelodeon.
So super excited.
This is just calling me back to childhood. I'm glad that you used to watch this, Nicole. I actually didn't think this would be kind of, I don't know why. I just assumed you watch the show. It's too mainstream for you.
I mean, yeah, I guess kind of, but it's also like, to me, this is very much like Twilight Zone-y for children.
Yes.
And you know me with the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
It's the greatest American television show. So
Right. Which
I'm
is,
just, yeah.
I think it's one of our better episodes too that we covered, the Twilight Zone.
Yes, go
If you
listen
haven't
to that
listened to
episode, guys.
Yeah, check it out. So usually, you know, obviously we always break down history. However, I figure we have a Nickelodeon historian. So like Nickelodeon. Greg, what can you tell us about Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Well, Are You Afraid of the Dark started production in 1990. It was not initially a Nickelodeon production. It was originally by Cinar, which later became Cookie Jar. And then in 1991, Nickelodeon picked up the series on a partial basis. They kind of gave it a trial run in August to September and got positive reviews. So they picked it up and then co-produced it. I think from season 3 onward, Nickelodeon were proper co-producers.
I didn't know about co-producing it and stuff. I know that used to air on YTV before it aired on Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
And I think when it got now on Nickelodeon, it was like actually a Halloween like a Halloween special.
Yeah.
Hence why we're covering this on Halloween.
And YTV, that's kind of like the Canadian version of Nickelodeon.
Yeah, this co-producing thing was something that had worked to great success with You Can't Do That on Television, which was another Canadian original that Nickelodeon picked up and then co-produced after a couple of seasons. So that was like their huge show in the 80s. So picking it up is a huge endorsement. Nickelodeon really believed in this show for a while.
Oh, wow.
I do remember them. Yeah, I mean, the production value of this show, like you can tell where it picks up.
Yeah.
And even when it was in its first few years, though, it had high production value
It did,
for
yeah.
children's television programming. I mean, the first season alone already gave you, what was that? The clown episode. I think it was the second episode of the series, the one where he steals a clown's nose at the haunted house. Did anyone see this episode? This is a good episode. We got
the tale of laughing in the dark.
Yes, Tale of Laugh. That's the episode. Yes, that's a great episode. So the kid is kind of like, I don't want to call him a bully. He's kind of just like snotty nosed to his like best friend apparently, and he tells him, it's just like, yo, they tell him the legend of the haunted house about how a thief who was also a clown died in there because he put out his cigar, and now his spirit haunts the place. So when they rebuilt the fun house, like they kind of built like something for like in his memory almost, kind of weird. And this kid, he's a bully. He's not afraid of anything. So he just has to go in there, steals a nose, and then now he gets haunted by this ghost thing. And it was, a lot of practical effects in that episode, but it's also just wonderful storytelling for children. So
yeah, I mean, the show lasted for 7 seasons, so Nickelodeon definitely believed in it. Like you said, the production value got way, way better. And what my favorite part about it, rewatching it as an adult, like as a child, it scared me, but like fun kind of scare. But rewatching it was very kind of like the show that inspired it, like the Twilight Zone. It had morals to it.
Yes.
Every story that I saw, there was like some sort of moral to it. Some were a bit wonkier than others, but for the most part, there was always something to learn and take away from it, which is also makes it educational, which is a nice little twist.
Without being, I don't know. It's not. I never found the show preachy, even when I was rewatching it.
No, well, I mean, just because it's educational doesn't make it preachy.
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes, but not in the show's case.
Not in this one. But okay, interesting. So, what about Greg? Tell me, do you have any favorite episodes that stand out from the original run?
Well, the first one that always pops in my head when I think of the show is the Tale of the Pinball Wizard, where
I saw that
kid
one.
is. I always had that fantasy of being trapped in a mall after it closed and just kind of enjoying that space and being creeped out at the same time. It's a very good episode.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, for me, it's the pool monster one. Do you guys remember that one?
I didn't see
Dead
that.
Man's Float.
Dead Man's Flow. Yes, so that one is that one. I mean, I just rewatched it right before we all got together just now.
Yeah.
I actually paid for that one to rewatch that one because it's a good episode.
Mhm.
So that one, the storyline is about like this kind of nerdy kid, kind of interested in like the popular girl who has a swim team, or she's in the swim team, and they find a pool in the basement that turns out to be haunted by some invisible monster that drowned the kid like decades ago.
Yeah.
And the kid who witnessed it, the lifeguard, is now the janitor of that place.
Mhm.
I literally just rewatched it. That's why I could like tell you beat by beat what happened in this episode. But I think one of the best parts about that episode though is like the monster effects that they use, right? It's just like the skull, the skeleton, and they have it dripping with like kind of red. It looks like flesh, but it's not. It's like some chemical reaction, but it's still terrible. I mean, that's like a nightmare-inducing sequence when that monster comes out of the water for the first time.
Yeah, and I saw a couple episodes too where I was just like wowed by kind of the special effects. I saw an episode with did you see the one with the camera that this kid got a camera and anytime he would take a picture of somebody they would befall tragedy. And it becomes this whole thing where it becomes an identity crisis because he accidentally takes a picture of his parents and all this stuff, which as children too, it's like that's a giant fear living life without your parents.
Yeah.
I saw this other episode about this kid who was obsessed with vampires and went to this town called Wisteria to awaken the old vampire whose name was Dreyfus. And the effects were so like he didn't even look like a typical vampire. He looked like old and withered and his skin was falling apart and it was disgusting. We were eating chili for dinner and I was like, I want to vomit. But that was good because it was like such like the makeup was so good.
Yeah.
And it was like, this person spent hours in a chair to look this frightening for a kid's TV show. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. The use of practical effects on this TV show was wonderful, for sure, to say the least.
The effects are definitely great. What I was impressed with going back to this show is, impressed is probably not the right word, but I was kind of surprised at how many of these stories had actual kids dying. There's not a majority, but a decent amount of them. And I suppose they could get away with that because it is a level removed, because it's if you haven't seen the show, listeners, it's the premise is there's this group of kids called the Midnight Society. They come out into the woods around a campfire and tell scary stories, and then you get to see the scary stories. So kids die in those scary stories sometimes. Like I was watching the tale of the shiny red bicycle, and like the first thing that happens in that story is a kid falls into a lake and drowns. And
yeah, that sounds about right.
It's like whoa, we got away with that on children's television, huh? We just straight up threw a kid in the lake.
Yeah, that's actually so interesting. Actually, you're right when you mentioned that. Even when I was rewatching, death happens so much now in our entertainment that you don't think anything of it. But you have to keep in mind, this is a TV show for children. So I don't think death is something you're supposed to associate with that. And however, you're right. There is a lot of people who are either implied dead or just die straight up on camera in the tale of the dead man's locker, the pool monster. I call it the pool monster.
Dead man's float.
Dead man's float. Thank you. In that one, for example, the kid drowns. The monster gets away with it at the very beginning.
Yeah, I watched one where they were playing this game with this man where it was like a dice rolling game, and it was like a chance game. And if you lost, he like pretty much took you and he shrunk you and he kept you as a prisoner, which even though it's not death, it's just as horrifying. But you're right, Greg, that they get away with it because it is a level of removed where it's not the kids who are telling the story. It's a bunch that are getting killed. It's the people within the story. And that's a very important aspect of this show is storytelling and the art of storytelling.
Yes.
But also like the line between fantasy and reality, which is an important aspect of this show. That kind of gets blurred a little bit later when we talk about the revival, but we'll get to that in a bit.
We will get back to that.
But actually, talking about the Midnight Society too, like the group always changes. There's always like at least like 5 or 6 of them, I feel like. And it's always like very light and fun when it's to their part. But they do have this thing where right before they throw the glitter into the fire.
I think it's like
it's non-dairy creamer, actually.
Non-dairy creamer. right when before they throw that in, they always say submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, which is a nod to the Twilight Zone.
Is it?
It's because Rod Serling in his monologues would, every time the Twilight Zone happened, he would appear and he would talk to you about what's about to happen before the Twilight Zone started off as a cold open. And many times during his monologues, he would say, submitted for your approval, Captain Jackie Leonard, or like something like
You're
that.
right. Now I remember that.
So the language of it
Yes,
is, it's pretty much like saying like, this is our version of the Twilight Zone. Because also there's some of the episodes that I watched, I'm like, this is way more fantastical than it is horror. So it's very much more fantasy, I feel like, because we're going into pool monsters and vampires and a magic camera and stuff, like it's kind of like all of, like, it's not straight up horror.
Or a chameleon.
Or
right?
a chameleon.
An enchanted chameleon with T and Tamara. That episode's the one that I remember. And I rewatched. It's a good one. The other one is The Jester. I don't know if you guys remember the one with the comic book character, right?
Ghastly Grinner. The Tale of the Ghastly Grinner.
Tale of the Ghastly Grinner. Yeah, so that's another one where that also had like horrific effects, right? Where like the clown was like basically creating like mindless zombies that would just like spit out green goo, blue goo. Terrifying episode.
Yeah, that sounds really.
And that kind of
nice.
really perversed a lot of like, because I love like comic books, growing up, and that kind of like in a weird way made them like scary. Like, what if like the Joker did in fact come to real life and stuff, and like, well, he kills people, he'll murder my family and me. Yeah, his design also was very Joker-esque. Obviously, it's a clown. So, but yeah. So,
well, did you know the show was a massive hit? It was around for 6 seasons, and I read that there was a board game based after this show.
PC game too.
And a PC game. Wow, that's pretty cool.
And a board game, so it's PC.
Also, I want to say I was surprised at how many people I knew in this show. Like one of the ones I watched was Jay Baruchel in it. I saw one with Ryan Gosling in it, and just like other
Ryan Gosling one.
Yeah, well, I saw it in like passing. I don't remember the exact episode, and then like just some of the people in the Midnight Society I recognized as such like '90s kids. So it must have been. I think the show was shot in Canada or something.
Yes, it was shot in Canada.
Shot in Canada, but it must have been like a really good show for a lot of actors to get their start off on, because I was just surprised at how many people I recognized.
Which is interesting because usually in these episodes, I would say, unlike the Twilight Zone and unlike the more contemporary Black Mirror, these tend to have like happy endings.
Yes.
And I think that has to do a lot with the fact that this is a children's program.
Exactly. The vampire one I watched was about like this goth kid who was obsessed with vampires and wanted to go visit this town, Wisteria, to just like, indulge in his vampire obsession. He finds a vampire, he kills them, and then after that he like takes off all his makeup and now he wants to like go to the Jets game with his dad. And I was just like, that's kind of bullshit. And like I almost kind of got upset about it because he wasn't exploring a different identity other than like trying to make his parents happy. And I was like, that's a ridiculous moral. But then I remembered it was a children's TV show, and that's probably an important moral for them to take. So
it is a children's program. Let's talk a little bit about all the stuff. All right, we can agree that like Twilight Zone for sure inspired this show.
Yes.
I would say that also though this show kind of inspired its own collection of spin-offs. Does anyone know what would be the first one to come to mind? We already kind of talked about it.
But the big '90s horror franchise I think most people think of is Goosebumps. Even though
that's the one.
Yeah, Goosebumps. This show predates the Goosebumps books by 3 years and the Goosebumps television show by 5.
Oh, wow.
In fact, pretty much all of the Goosebumps TV show ran between the gaps between season 5 and season 6 because there was a 3-year gap between those two shows. It kind of got a reboot after that.
Yes, that's right. That's where they introduced like kind of they started introducing some new characters. The first 3 episodes of that reboot actually follow. That was like the first time they had like a multi-episode arc. Maybe not the first time, but it was like 3 episodes.
They had some 2-parters before.
They did, okay. But this was like 3 episodes specifically kind of focusing around the Midnight Society. Specifically the leader. What is his name? Hang on.
Gary.
Gary, thank you. Gary, the nerdy looking one.
The nerdy looking one?
The nerdy looking one. He was like the team leader. He's the one who was like, he's the one who was like kind of calling the shots, I feel like.
I guess I didn't watch enough of them consecutively to notice that there was a leader.
Gary is usually the one that kind of, for me, always stands out. Like if I had to think about that show, like the Midnight Society is so important to it. Gary was usually the one that would go to a lot.
Yeah, okay, so Daniel DeSanto played Tucker, who was actually Gary's brother in the
Yes.
story, and Tucker's a little kid in the first couple of seasons, and then he becomes the leader in the 1999 revival.
And in the first 3 episodes, kind of explores a little bit about the origins of the Midnight Society too, if I remember correctly, because it was their grandfather who actually had started the Midnight Society and stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't seen it, but I kind of don't like it because one of my favorite things about the show is we don't know anything about the Midnight Society. They come together to sit around the campfire and tell scary stories, and then that's it. And that's all I want to know. And that's what works about the show for me, is that they don't have a life outside of that. The more mysterious it is, the better.
I will give you that. The show really did a good job of kind of isolating this, for the most part, to be these isolated stories.
Yes.
Sometimes, I mean, I wouldn't call it necessarily character growth, but the characters in the Midnight Society would sometimes learn a lesson that would get wrapped up in the actual episode.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it'll just be banter between the two of them and they'll just say something in passing and be like, well, I have a story that has to do with this. And that's as good as it gets for me.
Right. Basically, and I think I agree with you. Learning little, like not being so interwoven with their lives kind of made the show a little more special because it kind of made you feel like it could be any group of friends.
Exactly.
And I could one day have my own Midnight Society if I wanted to.
Yeah, and there's only so many stories I can take and respond to at once, so I'd rather respond to the stories that they're telling instead of having to respond to the story of their lives. So
I will say, in the case of this opening story you're talking about, it was called The Tale of the Silver Sight. It was a 3-parter.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a 3-parter. And it very much was kind of like, you remember with Scooby-Doo, and Scooby-Doo's always like, oh, the monsters aren't real. And then they did Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, and they kind of really pushed that this time the monsters are real.
Right.
It was kind of like that. It was also the show's 10th anniversary. It was a kind of a 10th anniversary thing where we're going to make an exception, give you all this lore, have the actual Midnight Society go through a scary story. So yeah, it was definitely off the beaten path for the show, but I kind of enjoyed it as like a little celebration for itself.
Interesting you should say that, because then almost 20 years later we come to where we are now.
Yeah.
With the new Are You Afraid of the Dark, which I would say for sure it takes that element of kind of like bringing in the Midnight Society to be part of the story, not just telling the story. So I think that's our excellent segue into getting
2019.
into the 2019 Are You Afraid of the Dark?
So in 2018, Brian Robbins takes over as the president of Nickelodeon. Brian Robbins had been very much involved in the production of a lot of 90s Nick. He was a director for All That and Keenan and Kel. He directed the Good Burger movie and things like that. So
pure art.
Yeah, so kind of one of his mandates when he came in 2018 was kind of leaning in these 90s nostalgia revivals, kind of in the same way that Nickelodeon used to like lean in onto with Nick at Night and some of their shows during the day, lean into kind of this baby boomer nostalgia. They used to have like old episodes of Lassie and Mr. Ed on the channel. So he's kind of been doing that. But I think he's been very smart in selecting his targets, in that he's been selecting programs that don't require a great deal of continuity. You've got Double Dare, which is a game show. All That, which is a sketch show. Blue's Clues, which is a preschool show, and continuity doesn't matter there. And being an anthology show, Are You Afraid of the Dark fits in with that idea, because you don't really need to know the continuity of Are You Afraid of the Dark. to pick it up at this late hour. So that way it kind of crosses both lines. It's nostalgic for the 90s Nick fans, but it's also incredibly accessible to modern kids.
Yes.
As opposed to things like the Rocko's Modern Life movie or the Invader Zim movie, which are drenched in continuity and is very much for the now 30-year-olds who watched him back in the day.
Yes.
That stuff, they don't put that on the channel. They hand that to Netflix.
Actually, that's a really good point that I didn't even think about until literally just now. But I mean, we talked about that when we did Rocko's Modern Life, right? Like Netflix knew for sure this is for a very specific audience.
Yeah, and it had something to tell that audience too. So
Right.
it was it was a smart move. for
Whereas
that.
where this one, Are You Afraid of the Dark? This one, you kind of, I kind of. So I when I was watching it, right, it's hard to like remove yourself. Obviously, I'm an adult. I'm not like children's programming usually doesn't speak to me. But just watch it, you have to try to watch it in the mindset of like who the targeted audience is. So, but he is right though, because there was enough there for me as someone who used to watch the show growing up, for me to kind of still appreciate it.
Yeah.
To appreciate what they were doing here. And I could see how if you're a kid though, you don't have any of that baggage, you're just enjoying an interesting story that's 3 parts and kind of spooky.
Yeah. If you don't know, Nickelodeon just released a 3-part miniseries of a reboot, revival, like all kind of 3, remake, reboot, and revival, but we'll call it a reboot of Are You Afraid of the Dark? They're hour-long episodes, and they're about a brand new midnight society. But we really have a main character this time whose name is Rachel. And Rachel is a new kid at a school. She's like a really good drawer who ends up drawing a really beautiful kind of like horror character that a classmate of her realizes the kid from It, which is another one. Graham. His name is Graham.
Just as wonderful as he was in It, though.
Yeah, he was great.
Just as wonderful
He
here.
was great.
He is like without a doubt like one of the best things about this.
Yes,
special.
definitely.
All right,
but so
Go on.
they have this secret clique that they get together and they don't talk during school. You know, it's a very much a private thing, and they want to induct her. She comes in, she tells the story, but little to everyone's horror did they know that her story would kind of come to life without giving too much away. And it has to do with an evil carnival, a carnival of doom.
Although I feel at this point we're going to give a spoiler warning, everybody.
Yes, we're going
because
to definitely.
I think
spoil
I
this.
enjoyed this series a lot more than I thought I would, and I have opinions because
I have a
enjoyed
lot
it
of
so much.
opinions too.
So, Greg, we'll start off with you. What were your first reactions on watching? Should we do each episode, or you want to just do the series?
No,
as
just
a
do the
whole?
series
We can do
because
the
it's
series
all
as a
one
whole?
story. So, what did
Kinda.
you think of it, Greg?
I quite liked it as its own thing. It doesn't do the anthology thing necessarily. It's very much
Yeah.
just a 3-part young adult horror story. But as a 3-part young adult horror story, I think it was really quite good.
I think so too. What did you think, Rolando?
Same thing. I actually, again, I wanted to do this episode, for example, right? Because I loved Are You Afraid of the Dark? But when I saw the trailer for this series, right, I was already kind of like, I don't know. They're messing with the formula that was great, a little too much for my liking. And, you know, I had to, again, remove myself from that kind of mentality to when I watched it, to kind of appreciate it and kind of realize, like, you know what? I think they did a good job with the property.
I think so too. I think they did a really good job, and I think not only as a story but as a reboot, it works in both areas. Although I do have one major qualm with it, which is the ending. I was praying that it would have all just been one of her stories.
Oh, thank you. I actually kind of was going that way too. I kind of by the end of episode 2, that's kind of I thought where they might have been possibly going.
Yeah.
This was all like this was the story that she was telling for the beginning of episode 1, and it'd be like a little bit of fake out. The reason I was thinking about it though was because I kept thinking just like, but as a viewer, will I have feel cheated?
But I think that initial shock and that cheat would also make it more special too, because it kind of like it got you. And there's a couple of reasons why I think it should have ended that way. One is that she would have told a horrifying story because the story she told in real life sucked. The kid goes to the carnival and then like that's it. Not a good story. I wouldn't have brought her into the Midnight Society for it. But like two, like the important thing about the original show is that there's a line drawn between reality and fantasy, and like these are these kids' fantasies, and they're telling stories. This has nothing to do with their life. Like even in the reboot, she talks to the boy, the next door neighbor, and he's like, well, I like telling these stories because I get to go home and be in my bed and live my life. Like these stories aren't real. And so that there's a line that's just drawn that I just don't think kind of works, because like blurring that line between reality and fantasy, for me, doesn't make it kind of in a weird way as scary. I wanted this to be in the fucking warped mind of this 13-year-old girl. And then even though not having anything to do with the fact that I know Are You Afraid of the Dark, and I wanted it to just be like a Midnight Society story, even then I still feel like I would have been even more shocked if that was all just in her imagination had it gotten me. So that's my opinion, but that's where I think it really kind of messed up.
I mean, if you think about it, right? How do you win over the Midnight Society? Is by telling them a story about like how they all die one by one.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and they all like forget their memories and stuff. So
interesting. See, for me, I think my biggest qualm, I could actually forgive that just because they were kind of the story that they told, and I actually like the ending, the literal ending when they're inviting the kid who got kidnapped in the first episode.
Yeah,
Arnold, right? I'm pretty sure. And I like, kind of this whole idea of like expanding the circle a little more. But actually, my biggest qualm for me, I think for me was the bad guy, the Top Hatter.
Mr. Top Hat.
Mr. Top Hat. It was kind of a little bit of a letdown of a bad guy.
All right, so backing up the story then in the show that she tells that comes to life is of the Carnival of Doom. The Master of Ceremonies is a figure named Mr. Top Hat. And his big line that he likes to say is, it's all part of the show.
Right.
And scary things happen, like somebody disappears or a scorpion comes out and he's like, oh, will this person survive? Well, don't forget, it's all part of the show. And people do start disappearing within the girl's story, and then in real life when that actual carnival comes to her town the very next day. The carnival comes, it's free admission, that's what it gets people to like flock to the carnival, and then people go. Some people disappear, and then the very next day, everyone forgets, and they had no idea that the carnival came to town.
I just wanted to point out how true that is. You offer a free carnival, people are gonna go.
Oh, people will
no
flock.
Matter what. Yeah, it's just.
But
like,
also,
the worst
like,
carnival ever. But it's like it's free. It's for me.
Yeah, but it's also like sketch, major sketch.
Oh yeah, for sure. Any carnival is usually sketchy.
Yeah, any carnival.
That's why
for
it's
sure.
typically a good setting for a horror.
Yeah. But then we find out that the little girl that the main character told about in the story to the Midnight Society was actually her when she first attended this carnival many years ago. And she has this power because she's a descendant. It's just this whole thing. But she has the power to actually remember.
It does get a little muddled because yes, she's the only one who has.
She's like a descendant of
case,
whatever.
Yeah.
And it turns out Mr. Top Hat is like a Faustin figure, and he sold his soul to the devil, and he's collecting souls to give to the devil in order for him to have the carnival he's always wanted.
Yes.
So that's the story.
I mean, he just wanted a carnival, man. So
my heart goes out to him until he starts abducting children.
Is he abducting children, or is the devil just abducting them while the carnival's in town?
Well, then I
think he's
even
just
less
an
forgive him
accomplice.
for letting the devil do that.
No, but for me, I think it was just Mr. Actually, Bartholomew, I thought was a more compelling villain figure than Mr. Top Hat.
Yes, no, that betrayal was.
That was a good betrayal.
That was a good betrayal.
I didn't see it coming.
Yes, but it's a lot going on with the devil and with memory and people. One of the characters, her older brother, is a cop, and then he gets abducted and like put into the carnival because once you get abducted, you kind of become their slave. So it's just like a lot of intensity going on, and would have been even stronger if it was in her story.
Yeah,
but I thought it was really, really good, but at the end of it, like it kind of almost lack of a climax for me in a weird way because it ended up being real.
I don't disagree with you. I think there's a little bit of a whimper at the end instead of like a bang.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like a kids program. It was actually so interestingly enough while we were talking about the backgrounds for this for the show, they were working on Are You Afraid of the Dark, like an actual movie. Paramount was working on it, right? And then they kind of just made it for TV, and that's how we have this now. Which I think it worked though. It kind of had a very cinematic feel for television.
This could very well be a movie.
So I wouldn't be surprised if I had seen this on the big screen.
Yeah.
It was directed by Dean Israelite, who also did the 2017 Power Rangers movie, which I think I liked more than most people. But
I think because we covered that up. We covered that on one
Yeah.
episode. Listen to it, guys. Actually, it was the fan favorite episode, if I remember correctly,
Yeah,
for
it
last
was.
year.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of where we all kind of ended up on that one. It was actually nowhere near as bad as it could have been, and it was actually, I think it had more positives than negative.
Yes.
So if you want to make a 90s revival that ends up being nowhere near as bad as you thought it would be, get Dean Israelite.
You're right. That's it. That should be his motto. That should be on his
Really
business cards
should
right
be,
there.
yeah.
I will make surprisingly good reboots of your kids' shows.
Oh, that's hilarious. Greg, what about you? What did you think? Like, well, I mean, what are we? I mean, I feel like me and Nicole kind of were focusing a little on the negatives. Do you want to focus on any positives? Because I have some positives also to talk about this.
Yeah.
I don't mind the supernatural stuff happening to the Midnight Society thing. I think that's a decent hook for this mini series. I kind of approach it the same way I approached the one from 2000, where okay, this is kind of a celebration of the project, while at the same time also being a caliber story for the series. Because putting aside the it's happening to the Midnight Society thing that kind of messes with the continuity, this is like just like a really juiced up version of a 90s episode. Like you could imagine, like if you could imagine the 1992 budget version of this on the actual Are You Afraid of the Dark?
No, but I do agree with you, and I think that's why for me this does work. For the most part, it very much felt like a 2019 version of a 90s storyline. Of an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. It did have that feeling. It did. At the end of the day, like I did feel like I was watching an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode.
Well, you know what this actually reminded me of? This reminded me of Child's Play. Greg, did you see the new version of Child's Play?
I did not.
Well, so Child's Play, this new one with Mark Hamill, it ended up being almost its own film with like nods to the original. And that's what this felt like. It was very much its own thing. It was a completely original story and it had its odes in there. But the big thing that we were talking about when Child's Play came out was like, it needed the fact that it was Child's Play in order for it to be told, even though it was a completely different film. And that's what this felt like, where this was this brand new horror film that needed the name Are You Afraid of the Dark in order to be told.
Interesting.
And that's, to me, that's what it felt like.
What I appreciated with this was that they didn't go the easy route and just dump a ton of references to previous episodes.
Yes.
They didn't do a winking like, oh yeah, you remember the scary clown episode? Yeah, well,
exactly. Because that easily could have fallen into it could have easily been like a lot of elements from the original one. There were parts that you could have easily capitalized on the setting alone, and they did not, which I agree with you, Greg. I will praise them for that one.
This one actually had a lot of homage to horror films. So the town that they were in was Argento, based off of Dario Argento. It was Argento, Oregon. All of their last names are last names of horror filmmakers. So she's
really?
Carpenter, John Carpenter. One of them was Fulci, which is Lucio Fulci, which is a horror Italian filmmaker. I picked up on that because I was like, oh my god, like
that's
Italian.
that's like a little high level there for like
that
children's
was.
programming.
Well, the fact that she turned to him and is like, have you seen The Changeling? I was like, girl, you know your horror movies, like shit. And that was also something that I appreciated, where it was like, at the end of the day, like this is a brand new horror story. Like you're right, like they don't have all of these like cheesy like nods to the original, something that the Twilight Zone remake did. Which
right?
was
Yeah,
annoying.
I agree. Twilight Zone came into mind for sure, where they went the opposite route of like any chance they did to like kind of reference an original episode.
Yeah,
they went that way, and it kind of just made it feel like just bad and cheesy and kind of unearned.
Yes,
right. Like they were trying to like really kind of make themselves like make the audience aware of like where this is coming from. This one doesn't have that, and I think that's what made this so much more successful. I don't know, actually. When you talk about the Chucky thing, Child's Play, I actually don't know where I sit on that one, on this one, because I think this one just maybe because I liked all the ritual behind the Midnight Society.
Which was a brand new element.
Yeah, it really was. But I can see how that could happen. Like, if you just look at how things go from where the original Midnight Society was to like now, keep in mind, like, you're only a teenager for an X amount of years in high school. So, like, I feel like obviously as more and more kids get in, there starts to be added elements of theatrics to where the point they are now.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that. And I kind of like that whole element of like kind of seeing like where the Midnight Society is now. That kind of really made me enjoy this. So I kind of feel like I would say it's just like, if anything for that, I'm going to say it's just like, I'm okay with this being an Are You Afraid of the Dark property.
Yeah, I think it still works. I think like having it be Are You Afraid of the Dark, but like a brand new story is what is really nice about it. It's like, oh, thank you, actually, Nickelodeon, for giving me something completely new, because I actually, at the end of the day, even though I think I would just want to see Are You Afraid of the Dark, I want and I kind of need new stories. So I really like that. Although they did keep one of the most important elements of the original.
Which is?
The theme song.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's true. They did.
So, and we didn't talk about that with the original, but like, let's just talk about how good that theme song is.
It's a very, very ominous and haunting theme song.
Yes. Excellent theme song. It was by Jeff Zahn and Jeff Fisher. So the two Jeffs.
The two Jeffs.
Just like all the different images. I think the theme song in the original is scarier than some of the stories they tell. But it was nice too, because in this remake, they actually made like homage to that theme song, because of the very first image you see is the rowboat. Is that a rowboat? In the middle of like a really creepy lake, and that's how you get to the campfire in this new remake. You have to actually get in that rowboat. And
yes, you see a lot more of that rowboat in this one than in the
which
original.
was one of the like very like, if you saw it, cool. If you didn't, it was okay. You could still enjoy it, and you didn't really need that to enjoy it. And that's like, those were the kind of things that I was there for. So,
what do you guys think of the characters for this new one? Because I will say the original one, they had diversity. But it was never like in your face. It was like a natural diversity, I feel like. Like, it just like, you know, you had your random butch. She was like kind of black. Like, you know. But like, you know, she was like, but she was like, you know, a tomboy. Then you had, I don't know if there was ever anyone like explicitly like, oh wait, yeah, the first guy, the new entry in the very first episode, the one that they had just initiated. He looked Latino.
Yeah.
And so there was like some natural, I think it was like a natural, I call it natural diversity, because they weren't like in your face about it. This one I think had like a wonderfully diverse cast, but again, it never felt like forced.
Yeah, well, the thing that I liked was that in the story that they don't have friendships. Like in school, they don't talk. It's like very much the secret thing that only exists within the hours of midnight to however late these kids are staying out in the middle of a horrifying forest.
Bad parenting. Once again, in one of our properties.
And the girl who is like, her movie making skills on an iPhone, like, hot damn, jealous.
Yeah, Akiko. I felt like Akiko was just not too much, but just like a degree more cartoony than the rest of the characters.
I would say so.
I don't disagree with you, but I think it worked for her character too. I love the whole idea of this like, well, maybe it's because like, you know, we're like, me and Nicole are filmmakers, and I know you used to try to do movies like in high school and stuff, right? And we know how much they never look as good as like her stuff does, because she was going way over the top. However, I think what I appreciate is just kind of this idea of like these like kind of this young up and coming filmmaker like really trying her hardest to like make these movies, and she's gonna do them no matter what. Yeah. I loved how you're right, she was a little over the top. I kind of appreciated her character for it. For the most part, I think all the characters were like actually kind of, I liked them.
I found her unrealistic until the moment her brother went missing. She started blaming the other girl, and I was like, oh no, she's really realistic.
I agree with you there too.
Like immediately turns on her and like just can't deal and shuts down and becomes a teenager, you know, like they're in over their heads, and it's horrifying what's happening to them.
I actually like the relationship they built between her and her brother too. I don't know where all her hostility towards her brother being a cop came from. That was never really
explained. It was just there.
It was just there.
Just to have him drive them later, I guess.
But yeah. A random cop just like deciding to drive these kids to another state.
Yeah.
So they talk about breaking the law. You know?
I have never heard never seen a piece of media say the word Idaho so much as the third episode of this thing. I don't think you heard Idaho that much in My Own Private Idaho.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But the other girl, I felt like she wasn't really explored enough. Graham was there; he was a comedic factor. The other boy who was her crush, and him being gone, and then like they had like a complete arc to their story. It's
talking
implied
about
that they're
Luis?
going to start dating Luis. Yeah, and then Luis was just there.
Luis definitely had the weakest development. Like I don't know if it's her acting or the writing, but like kind
Yeah.
of the way she treated Graham felt a little bit forced.
Bullying. Oh, forced. Okay.
It was like forced. It was
Yeah.
like kind of just like they were really hammering you over the head the fact that like she is about the social hierarchies.
Yeah.
And like Graham isn't cool enough to be seen in public with her.
Which I guess is believable. But
Yeah, but like I feel like nowadays you do that through texting and you bully them.
an Instagram.
In Instagram, right? You don't do it like so open because nowadays kids really. The truth is that kids don't communicate that well with each other, right?
That's true.
So, that's an interesting thing. Do you think the Midnight Society will continue to survive?
I mean, I think
The way
that they
kids are
could
going
very
now.
well do this all over FaceTime.
That's probably true. They could just FaceTime at midnight.
Yeah, they really could. Yeah.
Well, we haven't talked about Rachel though at all. What did you guys think of Rachel? Rachel's the main character, guys.
Yeah.
She's pretty good. She's pretty well acted. Having been watching just like a ton of Riverdale lately, I really appreciate that they got actual high school aged people to play high schoolers.
Yes.
Okay, I thank you, Greg, for watching Riverdale. That's my favorite like trash TV. It is. It's so bad, but it's so good. It's like the most wonderfully entertaining show you could watch.
Yeah.
And no, I agree with you though. Yeah. That's where this movie also succeeds is like in getting like kids to look like kids, where obviously like CW does the opposite. They
They
go
do.
the route of just like beautiful humans that don't exist in real life.
And she just had the typical like hero arc. At the beginning she doesn't have any friends, and at the end she was the one that like rallies them all together and has to be strong and learn about the stuff within her. But like opportunity missed. That could have just been her wicked warped story. Like it actually kind of ruins it in terms of a story, not even in terms of a reboot level, in terms of actual storytelling. I just think that the script would have been better if it ended that way.
All right.
But she's a great actress.
I think in terms of acting also, I think her acting was really good, specifically in her nightmare sequences. I think in her nightmare sequences,
She
like,
seemed
her acting,
genuinely afraid.
she really put on a performance that like kind of takes me away from this feeling also like a made for TV special. Again, they benefited from the fact that this was a movie that was probably going to go into theaters that got like moved to like TV.
Yeah.
But
You could
I
probably edit this into like a 2-hour movie and put it in theaters.
100%.
I agree, and I think that's where this benefited from it.
Yeah.
I honestly think being a miniseries also kind of works for me. Having to watch. I don't know how did you guys all watch it like all in one sitting, or did you guys watch?
No,
it,
I
like,
watched it over time. Well, that's also because now like we're kind of like a TV culture and we're kind of like a binge culture. So I think that the fact that like all of a sudden it stops and there's that cliffhanger that you have to wait a whole week for, maybe like, or just click another video for, gets you to want to watch it.
Yeah.
More than just unfortunately sitting down in a theater. I'm a big movie person, but at the end of the day, like now, like this is how we respond to what gets you to keep watching more is the fact that you have to watch another episode.
Yeah. Greg, how did you watch it? Like week by week or one sitting?
I watched the first episode when it came out, or actually a little earlier because they released it on YouTube.
Yes,
on the
I
official
remember
Nickelodeon site a
I
little
saw that
earlier.
too.
So I watched that. I didn't get a chance to see 2 or 3 when they came out. I marathoned those 2 just yesterday.
I did them all in one sitting, but I feel like I would have appreciated obviously like waiting week by week.
Mhm.
I like that feeling. That's why I'm glad Disney Plus is going to go that route of kind of releasing their programming week by week instead of doing the Netflix binge. I think each episode kind of ended on a good cliffhanger
They did.
where I would have wanted to find out how it goes.
True. Well, it also ends like there could be another miniseries, or like it kind of leaves opportunity for sequel, but like it also feels like a closure. It's one of those like could be.
It could no, yeah, you're right. It felt like one of those things where like it could, but if it ends here,
We're
no
okay.
one's gonna be upset.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it should. I don't know. I think that's where it should end for me.
I think it should end too, because, and this is typically the part where we always ask ourselves, was this needed? And I'm going to go ahead and start answering that question. And it wasn't needed. This wasn't needed, but we got 3 perfectly good episodes that could have been a movie, that could have been not Are You Afraid of the Dark? And that was what was so great about it, like we said. Are You Afraid of the Dark? You know, it lasted for 6 seasons. It was an early 90s show. It was a different time then, you know, like the way that kids even like received their messages were different. This was before iPhones, and this was before actually the rise of computers and stuff. And so like kids' relationships to what they watched were different.
Yes.
And I feel like in the environment of like 8:30 slot and SNCC, I think that's when it was, at nighttime, you know, not being able to like watch it in any other time other than through TV is also kind of what worked with the kids' relationship to watching it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're in a different era now, and people aren't as scared as much. Like
yes,
people's relationship to horror is kind of different. So I feel like for a lot of those reasons, the show like just should kind of remain as a 90s nostalgia thing. But because it was very much a brand new thing, and it was very much an homage to just the horror genre itself, more than the original show, it was a nice breath of fresh air for me. So even though we didn't need it, I like what I got from it. It was a nice surprise.
it was a nice surprise. I think sometimes because this is like one of those things that was made for TV.
Yeah.
So like Nickelodeon they obviously know their audience, and they kind of know who this is being targeted for. What I don't remember what the hell I was watching, but no, because I was getting constant commercials for all that, like the remake, like the reboot, I guess, for all that, and the parts of the skits that they were showing. First of all, I was actually impressed, but I was also surprised. I'm just like, wait, why is no one talking about all that being back? Are kids watching this? I don't know. I don't have easy access to them. I kind of wish I had kids now so that we could watch these shows with them, to be totally honest. But the reason I was just asking that is just because like I wonder how this performed, and I also the most thing I want to know is just like, were they really aiming to hit kids, or were they targeting like people our age? I think they were really going for the kids this time.
They were going for the kids. I think they were very much going for the kids who read a lot of young adult literature. This feels a lot like very much in line with just the young adult supernatural horror stuff that's on bookshelves these days.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. I
wonder what the kids are watching too. I have no idea. But I will say that also I feel like our like millennials are also actively watching things from their youth and things that are kind of aimed for generation a little bit younger than them. You know, like we're kind of overgrown children in some ways, and so we kind of like watching the things that we used to watch in our youth.
Yeah.
So I feel like even then, like Nickelodeon is still actually something that is for a little older of an audience now, in my opinion.
I don't know. I mean, I loved all that. I don't want to watch all of that. I'm happy. It looks like the skits are still doing good.
Those shows are pretty much on for the same reason that the like Lassie and Dennis the Menace was on in the late 80s, early 90s version of Nickelodeon. It's because, you know, I don't think it's an exceptionally new thing to millennials of a generation growing up and wanting to share what they grew up with their kids. And because you got to remember, yes, Nickelodeon is aiming for a young demographic. They're aiming for their preschool demographic with Nick Jr. They're aiming with their older kids with regular Nickelodeon, but they're not the ones buying the cable packages. Those are the adults. So
for sure. Yeah.
You've got to have, you know, having a show like All That and Double Dare is getting the 30-something parents like us to go, oh, I loved that show when I was a kid. I bet my kid will love it too. I'm buying a subscription to Nickelodeon.
Very true.
Yeah, excellent point.
But I also don't think that it's millennial parents that are watching it. I just think it's maybe millennials who have infantile taste.
It could be both.
It could be both. It's a combination of both.
I feel like I'd be that millennial parent who wants to like force these shows on my kids.
Well, as a viewer who, you know, actively watched it and enjoyed it on some level, I want to ask you, do you think that it was needed?
Yeah, I actually think it was needed. If only because I want kids. I guess here's my reasoning behind it. It's just because maybe if they enjoyed this, they'll check out the wonderful stories of the original run. Because rewatching them, I think they still hold up, and they hold up pretty well.
That's interesting. That's why you think it was needed.
Not necessarily. That's not the reason why. I think it was just a fun story.
Okay.
You know,
At the end of the day.
I love the whole idea of like kind of kids being creative. I think that's a wonderful message to preach.
Yes.
And this does, like, the very first episode is literally, actually the whole series is kind of, the whole, like, the mini series was basically about these kids being creative in some form or way. Like Graham, for example, he does music and he wants to do music composing for Akiko's films, you know, and it's just like, cool. I love this idea of collaborative filmmaking, and it just might be me as someone who grew up wanting to be a filmmaker that I kind of gravitated towards this, but I liked it. I think it was needed.
So Greg, did you think that this was needed?
I think there should always be an avenue for children's horror. I think this is a really solid horror story for television for young adults is I think that's a very good thing. Getting people into the genre, giving them quality content in the genre. Did that necessarily have to be Are You Afraid of the Dark? No, but also we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's true.
All right, let's do a lightning round.
We're going to do a lightning round.
Okay.
Midnight Society edition.
Lightning round. I think I want the induction of this brand new Midnight Society for sure.
Yeah.
Because that was just horrifying. I would have crapped my pants. But apparently you can tell a crappy story and be let in after all of that.
You're such a hater.
I liked the kind of like, you know, silliness of the original though. So I kind of want to be in the original Midnight Society.
Interesting. I actually think I might be with the new Midnight Society, if only for all the drama and the theatrics of it. It's so extra, and I'm all here for it. You can't even the mess up part is they're so extra, and you can Instagram it, but like you're not allowed to. So it's just like it's extra.
That's true. So what's the point?
Yeah,
Rolando?
what is the point of all that?
What about you, Greg?
I'll say the original Midnight Society only in so much as I had a crush on Gary.
Nice.
Wait, we just learned something about you. Are you a member of the LGBTQ?
I am. I'm a B.
I didn't. What? I did not know this. Oh, that's great. Well,
you didn't ask.
That's true. I'm just assuming people are just here asexual. You know. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's cool. We could have talked more about gay stuff. There should have been more gay stuff.
There should have been more gay stuff
in the new one.
Period.
There were no homosexual characters. Oh, I think that's still like a line that like I think most children's programming television isn't ready to
They
cross.
need to work on that.
I think that Disney little by little is trying. They had a coming out storyline on one of their
Frozen
shows.
isn't trying.
No, on like Disney TV.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well, that doesn't count.
That's literally main stuff. I think that the most important stuff.
Right, well, Are You Afraid of the Dark? You can watch the new one on Nickelodeon. Actually, you can watch the first episode on YouTube, like we said, and then the rest of it, I'm sure you can watch on the Nickelodeon website. A lot of episodes of the original are available on YouTube. So
not legally, if you want.
Not legally.
I just want to point that out. They're just there streaming, but yeah. I mean, it's a cool watch, obviously.
Definitely. And are you a big fan of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Let us know.
Email us remakes, reboots, revivals @gmail.com,
or Instagram us at Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals.
You can also hit us up on our Facebook page, Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals. And Greg, where can people find your content?
I am on YouTube at Pop Arena. That is my brand. I produce a lot of content, but I am here for my Knacks series, which is a semi-chronological look at every single show that ever aired on Nickelodeon. We're nearing the end of 1985. So you can find that on YouTube under the channel Pop Arena. You can also find me on Twitter at Pop_Arena. And I have a Patreon. Links on demand, I suppose.
So, Greg, what are you working on next?
Well, I got a couple of videos lined up for Halloween, including a actual video review of the Are You Afraid of the Dark revival.
Ooh. Oh, awesome! All right, so we'll make sure we'll put that in our show notes.
Yes, be sure to listen, guys.
Yeah, check them out. Oh, yeah, check them out. It's good stuff. Obviously, your links are going to be in our show notes too. So, Greg, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You were great. You really know your history and your little facts. Yeah, we hope to have you on again if we ever do
Yes.
another Nickelodeon show.
Be more than happy to join you.
Yay. And happy Halloween.
Oh, that's right. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Ooh. Well, until next time,
Stay unoriginal.